Hello, everyone. My name is Marina Isgro, and I am curator of media and performance art at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. Thank you so much for joining me and Guadalupe Maravilla in conversation this afternoon. Card captioning and American Sign Language interpretation are provided for this program. You can find more information about both of those options in the chat. Today, we will be speaking for about 40 minutes, and then we will open to audience Q&A. So if you'd like to submit a question, feel free to do so at any time. You can just use the Q&A button on Zoom. Okay, and now I'm honored to introduce Guadalupe Maravilla. Guadalupe was born in El Salvador in 1976 and currently lives in Brooklyn, New York. He received his BFA from the School of Visual Arts and his MFA from Hunter College in New York. He works in sculpture, performance, painting, video, and other media, creating visually compelling works that often address topics of trauma and healing. Guadalupe is perhaps best known for his intricate assemblages that can be activated to produce sound baths, immersive experiences in which specific audio frequencies are used to promote healing effects in the body and mind. The Hirshhorn recently acquired one of these works called Disease Thrower Number 12. Major recent solo exhibitions of Guadalupe's work have been held at the Museum of Contemporary Art Denver, the Brooklyn Museum, Henny Onstad Kunstcenter in Oslo, and the Museum of Modern Art New York. His works are in the permanent collections of MoMA, the Whitney, the Reina Sofia in Madrid, and the ICA Miami, among others. So today I'm looking forward to learning more about Guadalupe's work, including his recent projects and works in progress. So welcome, Guadalupe. Please turn on your camera.
Hello,
Hi, nice to see you.
Marina. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I think we can pull up the slides. So I thought we could start this conversation talking about your work, Disease Thrower 12. We're super excited to have recently acquired this work for the Hirshhorn collection. Um, so for viewers who are completely new to your work, could you just tell us a little bit about the Disease Thrower series and how these sort of relate to your own lived experiences?
So first of all, so I just want to say thank you to everyone that's here and for the Hirshhorn for putting this together. I appreciate everyone being present. Um, so basically, with the work that you're seeing here, this is a sculpture that was here in these images at MoMA. And it actually, this one and the one that's behind it in the second, in the image to the right, were the first sculptures that I made that actually vibrate. Um, and the whole idea came about, I was doing a exhibition like a few years prior at the like somewhere in New Mexico, and I did a ceremony, and someone showed up that was here. It was I'm not sure if the person was completely deaf or had some was hearing impaired, and I realized that I felt maybe the vibration would reach them, but it didn't really work that way. So I started thinking of like making a sculpture that someone can sit on and they can vibrate. And so if you're deaf or have your hearing impaired, you can actually feel the vibration. So basically, I decided to make these disease throwers. I believe it's 12 and 11, and these two, when they're played, it has a steel structure in the skeletons is steel. So basically, when I'm playing the gong, the sound, the vibration transmits through all the metal, the steel that's around it into the metal that's underneath the mat that's there, the straw mat that's there, and it creates vibration.
So,
So
yeah.
when it was exhibited at MoMA, we had those sculptures reserved for people to lay on top of them so they can feel the vibration of the sculptures.
Amazing. I wonder if you could step back just a little bit and talk about kind of the idea of sound baths in general and how you kind of landed on that format, why the sound bath is kind of a vehicle for healing.
So this goes back to my own experience with cancer. It's gonna be almost 12 years already in December that I've since I started my whole cancer journey. I'm cancer free right now. But it's like it's before I had cancer, I was working with as mainly as a performance artist and using a lot of sound, a lot of needed rituals that I would invent. And eventually, once I was sick with cancer, I discovered and learned about so many different ways of healing the body, the spirit, and the mind. And you know, it's just endless possibilities to heal, like with nutrition, with meditation, with so many other things, but also sound was a big part of my healing journey. Particularly when I was dealing with radiation treatments when I had cancer, and I realized that the vibrations of basically that someone took me to a sound bath when I was doing in the middle of my radiation treatments, and I saw a significant change right after. And then after that, I realized that I wanted to learn how to play these instruments. And these instruments that are used are not the same ones that are from Asia. These are contemporary instruments. They use technology, and they make them in Germany and the United States, most of them, the ones that I use. Um, and basically, I learned that these particular gongs have the same sound frequencies as elements, and also planetary systems. So basically, NASA discovered that every planet has a vibrational sound frequency, and these gong makers put the sound frequencies into these gongs. So when we're playing them, we're meditating, but we're also playing the gong, and you're feeling the energy of the person that's playing on the person that's meditating, and the energy of the frequency of the gong. And eventually that made it to my work. It started mainly as healing from cancer to learning more about sound. And I use many other instruments as well. Sound as medicine. And eventually it made its way into my art
Right.
practice.
Okay. This work has a very long media line here. It says gong, steel, wood, cotton, glue mixture, plastic loofah, and objects collected from a ritual of retracing the artist's original migration route. I wonder if you could sort of take a deep dive into the materials in this particular disease thrower. Tell us about them.
Yeah, I mean this one is actually, I mean, the main thing you see here is that drippy material that's there. And that's like a top secret material that I'm not gonna talk about here. But it is something that I discovered when I was a BFA student. And I pretty much I cook them in an oven, and I pretty much mold it and manipulate it when it's wet, and then it hardens into a very strong material. Um, and then the loofahs that you see there, and some particular ashwagandha roots that are there, like all a lot of these kind of plants and these kind of things I find when I go back to Central America and Mexico and retrace my own migration route. So that's a big part of the work too. It's like actually going back to Central America and Mexico and literally just like going back to these lands uh that I pretty much crossed when I was 8 years old, and I was unaccompanied, and I was escaping the Civil War from El Salvador. So now I started going back as an adult, as a US citizen, and confronting these places of trauma to heal my own I guess my spirit and my mind and my body. But then I also started bringing back objects from these places. And it's gotten to the point that these objects have become part of the sculptures. And then even more so, I've started creating microeconomies in these places, creating jobs and hiring people for specific details of particular projects.
Mhm. Right, fabricators to contribute to your sculptures. Let's page through a few additional images from the MoMA show. And I want to ask you, as we look at these, about the drawings that are on the walls. So we have the sort of disease thrower sculptures at the center of the room, but I think people will also see these sort of drawings all the way around the room. So I know that these are related to a game called Tripa Chuka that plays an important role in your work. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Tripa Chuca is it's a drawing game from El Salvador. And I grew up playing this game on a piece of paper, and you basically put pairs of numbers on a piece of paper. So it's two ones, two twos, two threes, and so on. and then you connect them. And the only rule is you cannot touch any line or any other number except your own. And it starts to form a kind of mapping. It looks like a topographical kind of drawing. It looks like a fingerprint between two people, but it's really beautiful because you're competing against each other, see who touches line first. But then at the end, it's like it becomes like this bond between two people, this document of just lines.
Mm.
So what I do with my exhibitions, like pretty much every exhibition at this point has had this kind of game on it. And what's really important for me is to actually play with someone who has been displaced. Um, and it again, creating the microeconomy. I get the museum to actually pay this person to
Mhm.
come and play the game during the install. And just recently I started doing a couple performances and it's a little I also don't want to put especially if the person is still going through their, I guess I guess they're like their status, their immigration status is kind of uncertain. I don't want to make this public. So I do these behind the scenes during the installs, and basically just in the last two that I did, I actually played with someone who's a performer who was okay with uh their immigration status is settled now, so they felt comfortable going in public and drawing with me. But ultimately I get the institutions to pay this participant uh to make the drawing with me. And it's really beautiful because I've been traveling, I guess, the world at this point doing this game. Last year I went to the Gwangju Biennial in Korea, and basically the institution got hired, was able to find someone and hire them to come play with me that was actually had defected from North Korea.
Wow.
And yeah, and
Okay.
last
Found this on the web first, and
sorry.
basically I
No
begin to
worries.
Um so basically last year also São Paulo Biennial, they hired someone from Ghana who was
Mm.
displaced. And this year, my show PPW, we actually had someone that was escaped the Taliban from Afghanistan, and then she played the game with me,
Mm.
right? So the game kind of almost gives the space a particular energy
Right.
that it's like really beautiful foundation to the exhibitions.
I'd love to ask you a little bit more about kind of the role of play and games in your work because I think in one respect, your work is very serious and the kind of trauma that it deals with is very heavy. But then you're often showing the work alongside this game. You know, it's a children's game. So I wonder if you could say something about how you understand the role of play. Is it about connection? What is it doing for you?
Yeah, it's also even in the works themselves, some of the decisions
Yeah.
that I make in the work that are very playful. Um, and that has to do with being a child that has experienced war before, right? I
Mm.
grew up in the middle of a civil war in El Salvador, and basically, those are very difficult times. Those are very difficult moments in life. But I learned from that we still have to, I still went to school. I walked to school by myself during the middle of a civil war, right? I still played on the way to school, even though, oh, this is happening around me. So it's just like it's also I think something that I just learned from this kind of growing up is that no matter what challenges you're going through, you still have to live your life and you still try to have to make the best out of it in order to get through it, right? So I am talking about very difficult, I guess, issues as far as displacement, war, and cancer, right? Which are all part of who I am. And it's really important for me to talk about them and still like really like be playful about it
Mhm.
and still play because it's such heavy, uh, yeah, it's just really intense work. But it also, for myself, it allows me to actually look at it from a perspective of this child that is a survivor of war, right? A survivor of cancer. Um, and just like looking at things from a positive perspective, even though they're very difficult.
Mhm.
I always talk about how cancer has been my biggest teacher, and it still continues to be to this day. And even when I was going through cancer, I actually did a lot of work to try to make sure I stayed optimistic and positive the whole time. I still got to do things that I love. I still got to play and laugh with my friends, and like all this is really important. So that is just always who I am, and it reflects in my work.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we have a short clip showing one of the activations that took place at MoMA. So why don't we play that video and then you can tell us a little bit about it.
Sound as medicine is something that's been going on for a long time. And today we're continuing that here, particularly using the gongs. And they have the same frequencies as planetary systems and different elements. And we use that as the healing tool. That's what we're using today. You know, the bodies are around 70% water. And in this water, we carry stress, we carry anxiety, and sometimes we can even carry trauma. And vibration helps us release those tensions.
So I wanted to ask you just about the choice to stage these sort of healing practices in a museum setting. So I know that you've worked with a church, for example, you've worked with other places. Why museums? Why are those an important site for you?
This is a simple answer. I'm an artist. Um, Basically, for those that don't know, I guess for the last, I guess 7 years, I have been working with communities that are the undocumented community at a community center and a church. And I've done hundreds of ceremonies there in private for these communities and my community. And basically, at the same time, I have been doing them at the exhibitions. During my exhibitions, I think is also really a good opportunity to actually share. I talk about my sculptures and my work in general as the Trojan horse to healing. And what I mean by that is like you see this sculpture, you're interested in what that is, and then you see on a listing that there's going to be a ceremony is going to be activated. People show up without even having a meditation practice, and next thing you know, they're having a really beautiful experience, and they start asking more questions about what healing is for themselves. And next thing you know, they're meditating on their own, right? So, or even those that already have that practice, they can go a little bit further. So I think that it's really important for me to have both, I guess, the private ceremonies that I have with the undocumented community and these more public ones in the museums. Um, for general audiences or for the cancer community, I always tend to do them in these institutions. They're really easy to get to, and they have the space. So I've been doing a lot of cancer ceremonies in the museums also. Even at my solo show at PPW this year, I did something a little bit different, which was I did a ceremony for broken hearts. And so basically that one was like filled and there was like a line outside
Oh,
of people lining up. And what was beautiful about that, it was that people that don't really even have a spiritual practice at all were showing up because I had a broken heart. right? And broken heart can mean it's not just romantic, it could be so many other things as well. Someone showed up because they just had lost their mother like
Mm.
2 days prior, you know?
Yeah,
So that was like really touching and really powerful how yeah, people that normally friends of mine that don't have a spiritual practice were showing up because
right.
I had a broken heart, and they kind of started really like opening up to this kind of healing or meditation. So that's really beautiful. So basically, the institutions are my stages. Like I'm traveling all over the world doing these things now. So it's really beautiful to for the institution to put this together so I can reach
Mhm.
audiences that I would never have access to.
Right. That makes total sense. So, why don't we jump to another project now? I'd love if you could talk about the work you did for Socrates Sculpture Park in 2021. This was the first outdoor work that you made, to my knowledge. And I wonder if you could talk about kind of the challenges of working outdoors, of translating your practice to outdoors, and also the specific material that you used, because I know you're not using the same cotton glue mixture that you use in the indoor work.
Yeah, so basically these sculptures were made out of I believe 7,500 pounds of recycled aluminum. And basically Socrates offered me to make an outdoor sculpture and create a space. And this is also during COVID. So after the exhibition was done, like we actually had really big ceremonies here. And in the whole process of melting metal and creating an environment that I can just mold certain fruits and vegetables that are helping me heal from post-cancer was a great opportunity to actually start exploring how metal and the texture that it has and creating these Easter 13 and 14, which you see here. But also like I was able to create actually grow my own medicinal garden around the sculpture. And here's a tripachuca plate on the grass with a non-toxic paint. So they would only last for a few
Mm.
days if it was raining. I also had a opportunity to have a fire pit in the middle. And then also I was able to fabricate more gong stands so I could have more sound stations all around because once we're outside, one of the challenges is sound. Like how do we're in
Right.
the middle of New York City, so we need a lot more sound. And I was able to bring other gongs and a team of healers to come play the sculptures with me. And it was really beautiful. I mean, I have a whole team of healers that they go on and do ceremonies with me all the time. So in this case, I think we had like about 8 of us, and in the middle, I had hired another healer that works with fire, and this person practices, or these groups. I use several people. Um, they actually use fire as a healing tool, as medicine as well. And especially if we're having so many people there, they can actually really cleanse the space and clear anything that's being blocked or being released by using the fire as medicine. So that was like a really important part of, there's an image of that right there. Um,
Oh,
and
sorry, go ahead.
and this was at the time, like I said before, like a lot of people this is the first time coming out of their house and doing anything public. So it's very emotional after being in lockdown in COVID for like a year and a half or whatever it was,
Mhm.
for them to come out and do healing ceremonies in this space. And, the sun would time it so like the ceremonies would start with the sun setting behind here, for example. And, we had a cancer ceremony, 400 people showed up. I believe we had a ceremony that was over 1,000 people that showed up, which is really, really powerful. Just the timing of this exhibition was it couldn't have been better. It was such a great experience from
Yeah.
beginning of building the sculptures in the park to the last ceremony. It was just so beautiful and so much emotion for myself and everyone around me. I'll never forget that beautiful experience. And also the team at Socrates was phenomenal. Just like everything just kind of went the right way. It was one of those really magical projects that I'll never forget.
It looks really beautiful. How do you find the healers that you work with? What
They
is that
just we
process? Yeah.
Yeah, we just kind of we just come together. Like it's just like they're always, during my travels, and I could be doing my laundry, and no, someone starts talking to me, and next thing you know, like they're performing with me, like in doing the ceremony with me, right? So that's
Amazing.
kind of like how it happened,
Yeah.
very organically, and there's more and more coming all the time, and I keep
Yeah.
meeting,
Do you tend to
and
work
it's
with the same
beautiful.
people over and over, or is it sort
I,
of,
I
yeah.
have I have my core group of people that
Mhm.
are I'm really, because we've done hundreds of ceremonies at this point
Mhm.
together, so I trust them. And then I have new people that come in and add a special touch to the ceremonies as well.
Right. I wanted to just touch on the title of this work, and I think there's a billboard on one of these slides that shows it, Planeta Willix. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the title?
Yeah. I was thinking about of ancestors with this one, like thinking of planeta, abuela is like a gender neutral term for grandmother, grandfather. And I was really thinking about the lessons from our ancestors with the medicinal plants that are there, and about that care and that community healing, and that just coming together and healing together, which a lot of indigenous cultures practice and my own ancestors practiced. So that was a big part of it. Yeah, healing together, especially coming out of COVID, and healing in space. Um, uh, that was like the idea of the name.
I love seeing the plants in your background right now as we're speaking. Are you a real plant person?
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Cool. I think let's move on to your Brooklyn show. It's a few slides down. There we go. So this is an exhibition that took place in 2022. And one way you've spoken about it is that it layers sort of three stories of displacement. So I wonder if you could share those stories with us and set up the exhibition.
Yeah, Tierra Blanca Joven. This is very unusual too. This was happening at the same time as the MoMA show. Um,
Mm,
but to have those both shows parallel each other, very completely different shows, was really special for me. So Tierra Blanca Joven actually it's actually a term used for a volcanic eruption that happened in El Salvador, about 1700 years ago. And this volcanic eruption was felt even in Europe because I think there was like this ash everywhere. Um, it was one of the biggest volcanic eruptions recorded, and the Maya who were in El Salvador were actually displaced because they couldn't grow their crops. So I was thinking about that displacement that happened, and eventually they were able to come back after, I think, a couple of years. Um, Also, I was talking about my own displacement from El Salvador. And I also was talking about, there's actually a video of Central American teens that I made inside of a detention center, and I played a performance. I guess we did a performance together. So talking about those three displacements, but the fourth one is about the objects in the museum, Brooklyn Museum's collection, Central American Mayan objects that are in the museum's collection, and thinking about their displacement, and thinking about, so that just shows four different types of displacements.
right.
Um, yeah.
So you mentioned these works from the Brooklyn Museum's collection, and those were, you selected some of those and included them in the show. Is that right? What was that process
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, it was like, I think at some point the Brooklyn Museum was a lot like the Met. They have a massive collection of objects from all over the world. And I started wondering, why are these objects here? Why are these objects not in their home countries? Right? A lot of them were looted and bought and resold and donated at the end. So the museum has them. So I wanted to see the objects from El Salvador, Central America, from my ancestors. Why are these here? And I was able to bring them out, and to be part of my show. But equally as important as that was the fact that I was able to bring in a healer, a curandera from Central America, Mexico, and she actually cleanse the objects that were in the museum and create a whole ceremony for them, a private ceremony. And also by using smoke and other healing methods to bless them and to cleanse them. And she was able to communicate with them as well, which is really beautiful. It was a total private ceremony. Um, so, and then I guess they were returned back and they had been cleansed.
Hmm. Wonderful. Could you tell us a little about the video that you mentioned, in which you worked with teens to create a performance?
Yeah, I was my dear friend Shalene Rodriguez invited me to go into, I guess MoMA had a project with a teaching I guess a program which they actually were going into the detention center and give art classes, and I was able to go in there and talk about my art and just I guess healing with a lot of the kids that were in that detention center. They had the boys and the girls separated, and I did workshops with both groups. And basically afterwards, I was able to go outside and we were able to wear our mask. And I was able, we're in the basketball court, and and then pretty much the whole performance was I was asking them what they were doing at 1 o'clock, and they would just act it out. And then 2 o'clock, they would act it out. And then see, I said I would get to understand the 24-hour cycle. They spent months. There was a 14-year-old boy that had been there for 48 months, and the same repetition, the same schedule
Wow.
every day. Um, and just waiting for his court hearing to see what would happen to him. And this kind of gave me an idea of what their 24-hour cycle was like. So that's what
Hmm.
the performance in the video is about.
That's so interesting. Do you, so one thing that we've seen about your work to this point is that you're often putting yourself in these situations where you encounter other people's trauma, difficulty that other people have gone through. And I wonder how you navigate that sort of on a personal level, hearing these stories and these experiences every day.
Well, I don't know what you mean by other people's traumas. Is there people are actually I guess as far as those teenagers, they're going through it, like right there,
Right,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and and literally it is about giving them a helping hand.
Hmm.
It's never about exploiting them.
Right.
So it is about giving them a hand in, as far as like the communities that I work with in the church. I've done food drives, coat drives, endless ceremonies in that space. I advise them. I've been a mentor to them. I've been involved in everything in so many endless things. I've actually donated my own grant money to them,
Yeah, right.
etc.
It's amazing. And I
Right?
think what I'm asking is like, do you have some kind of self-care practice to balance that? Because
Yeah.
it just seems like a
So
lot
so
to
then
take
with
on.
the cancer community, we come together, we do a whole ceremony for them. But in addition to that, like I invented my own meditation that deals with cancer,
Mm,
and I teach some that meditation. And my whole point is to actually give them at least one day of hope for one day during their journey of healing. And if that's all I can provide to them, that's my job, like that's what I'm doing. Because when I had cancer, I was looking for one day of hope, one day of light, just to kind of give me a little hope so I can keep going through this very difficult time.
right.
But the same thing can be said about anyone that's gone through this, being displaced, being a refugee, escaping violence, right? Just give me one day of hope, and that gets me to the next day. Hopefully it does a little bit more than that. But that is the goal with like everything that I'm doing. Um, but for me, I have a extreme meditation background, right? I've done the work already to heal myself from all these things already. I've been through it myself, so I can advise them on a lot of different things. But I'm completely I have to do the daily work myself.
Right.
Uh, I do these meditations every day. My nutrition is another one of my shield. I don't eat like everyone else. Um, so my discipline to my spirituality and the way I behave in the world is how I protect myself.
Okay, well, let's move on to another series that I wanted to look at with you. These are called the retablos. And when I heard you speak about these recently, you said, I am a painter who doesn't paint. So could you tell us a little bit about how you make these?
Yeah, so again, like I going back to retrace my migration route, um, I I talked about how I bring back objects from Latin America, Central America, and Mexico, and they become parts of my works. Along the ways, I also find fabricators that I'm able to hire. In this case, Daniel and his father, Alfredo, they both paint for me. So basically, I give them a digital sketch and my text, and they're able to actually make the paintings for me. And the thing is, I can also paint, but I choose to create the microeconomy with the museum money or the institutional money to create these jobs. Daniel, his wife is been going long term like brain cancer, and he's using a lot of these funds to help pay for those medical bills that she's going through.
Wow.
So he's painting these paintings about cancer. His own wife is going through all kinds of treatments for the last couple of years. So that's another way to give back.
Right. Could you tell us
So that's
about, oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, could you tell us about the example that we're seeing on screen?
Yeah, so basically this is I guess a painting a retablo that I made thanking my radiation therapy machine that killed the cancer tumor that I had. So anyway, so it talks about that. So a lot of the uh, most of the paintings talk about my own experiences that I've gone through healing and just like being alive in the world.
So you mentioned doing a digital sketch for the painter. How much direction are you giving? Are you ever sort of surprised by the results, or it
Well, yeah,
adheres closely?
pretty straightforward. Like
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, to like even like one of the little details like a centimeter off, I'm like, can you move it over a little bit? Color. So they already know. I mean, we've done so many at this point that they know exactly how I want it. In the
Wow.
beginning, there was more like of that. Can you make this red a little bit lighter or hotter or whatever, right? So like those
Hmm.
details kind of we get into it. So yeah, but at this point they know exactly what I'm looking for. So
Right.
it's less and less of that these days.
Makes sense. Can you say something about the sort of history of the retablo format, where that comes from?
Yeah, so basically the retablo format really originates from Europe. It was like a thing in I guess southern Europe, and basically they're devotional paintings. So they were very religious paintings. And people, I guess, in those times, in those cities, in those towns, would go if there was something that they were being challenged by, they would go to the local because there was local retablo painters everywhere, and they were asked for a painting so they can put in their house to protect themselves from whatever they're going through. This eventually came when the Europeans came to colonize the Americas. They brought this custom with them and continued it. And then I guess it became part of our culture. You can tell like how Frida Kahlo was heavily influenced by this practice. And nowadays you see less and less of these retablo painters.
Hmm.
Um, so I actually met Danielle when I was looking for objects, and I asked him to make me the first painting. And at first, what people do with him is they just give him like text and then he makes it up. So
Hmm.
we tried that. And then I was like, what if I just give you a digital sketch so you can make it exactly how I want it because I'm an artist? And he said yes, and that's how it happened. And eventually, like it kind of kept going.
I love these. So maybe let's talk about your buses now. Here we go. So lately you have been working with buses that you modify and make into sort of mobile healing sites. Can you tell us a little bit about the history behind these?
Yeah, so this is Mariposa Relámpago. It's a vibrational healing instrument. So basically the sculpture that's at the Hirshhorn gave me the idea that I can turn this buzz into a vibrational healing instrument. So those gongs that you see that are there, when we play them, I actually constructed how they're hanging. They're actually hanging from there's two I-beams that run in the middle of the bus, and those gongs are just, they're literally hanging. They're connected to those I-beams.
Mhm.
So basically, when me and my team play the gongs, the vibration travels through the entire floor of the bus, and it's really even. There's a gong on top, and there's a giant gong in the back, and when all four are activated, it creates a vibrational healing instrument that multiple people can be in the bus at the same time during ceremonies. In addition to that, again, going back and retracing migration route and collecting objects and fabricating objects, the bus, I think, has yeah, like over almost 700 objects on them that I collected and got fabricated. Um, so there's like things from El Salvador and a lot of Mexico and El Salvador things that are on the bus. Um, and the bus itself has a pretty radical story. I actually made a 30-minute film about the bus, and basically, I wanted the bus to actually have the same migration route that I had as a kid. So that would mean coming from El Salvador, going through all the way to Mexico into the United States. So the idea was to buy a bus in El Salvador and bring it to the United States and turn it into, bring it to Mexico City, transform it, and then have it go to the United States. So that's like the whole concept behind it. Along the way, like we had some hurdles and challenges that you could imagine, and we made a whole film of the whole process. And yeah, there was like shamans involved in helping make decisions which bus, and mechanics and lawyers and I guess custom agents. Like it was just like a lot of layers and bringing a bus like this to United States. But also thinking of like how these yellow buses are originally yellow. This was a yellow school bus in the United States that would transport children. And eventually this bus was sent, these buses, after they have exceed extra amount of miles, they get sent, sold to Latin America, and they get repurposed as transportation buses in Latin America. And I wanted to bring back one of those same buses back to the United States and transform it into a vibrational healing instrument.
Um, so the sort of like total work of art of this bust just reminds me of something you said once, which is that you're less inspired by visual art or visual artists than by film. So could you tell us a little bit about why film? What is it that you're looking at in film? Maybe what kinds of films you're inspired by and how you see your art as related to film.
Yeah, no, so basically, yeah, I love art and all artists. Like I really, I look a lot of art, obviously, but I'm like really influenced by film and have always been. So that's like my core. Because it's like I mean, I've gotten to the point that I actually feel like a film director with everything that I do, because there's so many details that I have to pay attention to in that sense, because there's sound, there's detail to the objects, there's details to the ceremonies, there's details to performances, there's so many details of just location, institutions, and so on, right? And so many people that I have to kind of work with, and yeah, pretty much I'm choreographing like the
Hmm.
whole thing,
Yeah.
the whole experience. So I deeply connected to film that way. But also like, yeah, the directors of those filmmakers, like they have their hands on everything, every little detail, right? To actually have a final product. So in a way, I feel like very connected to filmmaking and how complex that process is. But I guess as an artist, as a visual artist, um, but as when I was a student at SVA, like in the late 90s, I would totally I studied photography. My BFA was photography. So it was my homework to go look at films and study films and listen to sound and pay attention to these details from these films. And that's kind of like how I started as a visual artist. And to this day, like it has like had a major impact. And then you see like all these great films from, from Tarkovsky and Kurosawa, like all these filmmakers that do just legendary filmmakers, and so many others. And it's just like it's been a major influence in my practice.
Right. Wonderful. So I'll ask you one last question, but in the meantime, if people have questions from the audience, please drop them in the Q&A and we'll get to those soon. So Guadalupe, could you just tell us to close out what you're working on now?
I have a lot of projects going on right now. But yeah, right now I'm actually one of my dreams is to transform Mariposa Relampago into a temple in New York. So that's like a big thing that I'm trying to figure out financially and try to make that happen. So if anyone out there wants to help me make that happen, reach out. I'm here. Um, so it's like really like transforming Mariposa Relámpago and having a temple in New York City. Because again, going back to what is needed, the mental health is not too well around here. So I see all the challenges that are there, and this temple would be a space for healing, a space for sound, and kind of organizing and trying to figure out logistically how to make that happen. That's the challenge that I have right now.
Right.
Um, and also like what kind of programming you would have, right? Yeah, so I'm being presented with like a really big challenge right now. It's how to make a temple in New York City.
Amazing. I honestly like seeing the ambition and scale of your work grow and grow and grow. I'm sure that this temple is going to happen probably sooner than we all think.
Thank
Um,
you.
all right, so let's jump to the Q&A. We have a great question from our curator, Jose Roca. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's a little bit long. He says, I once visited an archaeological museum in Santa Marta, the Colombian Caribbean, with a mamo or elder shaman of the Kogi community. Upon looking at objects in a vitrine, someone pointed out that more of those objects were in museums in Germany, and that the Colombian government was asking the German institutions to return them. The Mamo said, even if they are returned, they will end up in a museum in Colombia. These are actually tools to plant rivers, so they don't serve us any purpose if they are still sequestered inside a vitrine. Question for Guadalupe. What is your take on the restitution of cultural objects? Since most archaeological and ethnographic museums show objects as if they were sculptures, completely estranged from their ritual or spiritual contexts, are we better off creating our own contemporary devotional objects?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And that's like and obviously when I'm here in New York, it's like, oh, I want these objects back in El Salvador as soon as possible, right? But then I started, thinking it's like, well, maybe El Salvador doesn't have the infrastructure to hold these objects, and also for them to be activated how for their original intention, like the question by Jose says, But that was one of the questions that I had the curandera who was communicating with the objects. She asked the objects what they thought. And I think out of the 22 objects, some of them communicated that they were actually, yeah, they actually mentioned that if they were to go back to El Salvador or something like this, if they would have stayed there, they probably wouldn't even exist anymore. But she also said that they're okay being here right now, but eventually they would like to be going back
Mhm.
because, but under the right circumstances. So it kind of relates to that, right? So it's like, okay, we're gonna be behind a vitrine here or a vitrine in El Salvador, right? And they were originally these particular 22 objects that I bought, they were actually instruments for they were healing instruments as well, most of them. So they were supposed to be activated, and they have not been activated in decades,
Hmm.
right?
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it just reminds me of what you said earlier about your art being a sort of a Trojan horse for introducing healing into the museum. The museum acquires one of these works, and then, there's a pathway to bring ritual and performance and healing into that space.
Yeah, and that question too presents is presented to I think of my own work after I'm gone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially like this one at the Hirshhorn or like the ones that are all the ones that are in the museums everywhere. It's like really in thinking, I was like, oh, are they just gonna be like displayed as sculpture?
Right. And I
Um,
think we asked you that in like to write the acquisition contract, like what happens far, far into the future, like 100 years from now.
yeah, I know,
Um,
and it would
yeah,
be really beautiful for them actually to be activated all the
right.
time by the right healers, right?
Absolutely.
I could imagine them 100 years after I'm gone of curator putting them together and acting them in the future and doing ceremonies.
Yeah.
That was like that's so beautiful to me and
Yeah.
like really thinking of this question how these objects um can be used now or I mean we're not even allowed to touch these objects anymore or
Right.
any of the healers are even allowed to touch them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very challenging.
Hmm. Okay, another question here. Do the frequencies that you work with align with the color frequencies of the chakras? I don't know if I fully understand that one, but maybe you do.
Mm, no, I don't. The color frequencies I use don't relate to the chakras. But some of the sounds that I use relate to chakras. For example, when I play the harmonicas and other instruments, I like to use, when I'm doing healing for myself, I like to use instruments that have the C note because the C note is connected to the abdomen and I guess the root chakra that's there. So because I had cancer in my colon, I automatically feel like when I'm playing whatever instrument, I'm using the C note because I'm sending vibration to that area where I had cancer.
Mhm. Mhm. Are there any other questions? I'm just going to wait a couple seconds to see if we get any more in the Q&A. While we're waiting, I wonder, you've talked a lot about your cat in past interviews that I've read and heard with you, and this idea of sort of cats as also having some sort of healing qualities associated with them. And I know if there are cat people in the audience, they'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yes, my cats they're always been part of they're healers, you know. I have a lot of like post-cancer illnesses that I'm still dealing with and sometimes I would come home and just like be in going through that and they automatically would know and they would just come and start kneading and purring in my stomach. And I was like, how these animals really know when the right timing for this is. And also they're purring, so they're sending vibration into the stomach and how they're touching and they're kneading. So I think like sound is medicine. I talk about is nothing new, and there's many ways to obtain it. And you get a cat sit on your lap and they're purring, and it's like that's medicine. Also sitting in front of the ocean, listening to the waves that is sound as medicine. Hearing the trees in nature, just the wind move the leaves around, that rattle and sound, that's also sound as medicine. It's everywhere in the natural world. We don't really need a very expensive instrument to just have the experience. We just have to make that time to make it happen.
Mhm. I love them. Okay, I think one last question here. Actually, no, two. This person is asking, do you practice any movement as healing, such as dance, tai chi, yoga?
Yes, there is a movement meditation that I learned in Tibet that actually helps me with my digestion and it's called prostrating and I do that every day for about 20 minutes. That's a very important one for me and especially with all the health issues that I still have today.
Okay, last question here is, could you share with us some books or resources about art, trauma, or healing? Any
Um
favorites?
yeah, I don't like as far as books, like the main one that I think that really there's so many, but like there's the one that really impacted me like on a serious level was the biography of a yogi by Yogananda. And if you like read it, like it really it's actually a book that I was reading when I was going through cancer. But I think that everything that the question says about art, trauma, and healing, it's all in the book. You just have to read through the whole thing and start like breaking it down. It's not a book about that. It's like literally the story of a yogi's life that brought yoga to the United States in the 20s and 30s and traveled everywhere, sharing his message. But I think that that book is probably one of the most important books that I read because it got me through a very rough time with cancer. And actually should I should just read that book. It's really special. But a lot of the information that I learned from my own journey was there. And the main thing that I learned that can be applied to anything is just letting things flow, how they're supposed to flow. If you're going through something very difficult and challenging, sometimes you have to persevere. Obviously, first instinct is to get out of there, but if you can, there's no choice. Like for example, cancer, you can't just like, okay, I'm not gonna deal with that. You have to deal with it. And it's actually something that you have to persevere and say, this is my path. What can I learn from this path, even though it's a very difficult path? So the same can be applied to so many different things. But yeah, the book is really profound. It has a lot of layers. But I strongly recommend it's a book, The Biography of a Yogi by Yogananda.
Great. Thank you for that recommendation. And I think we'll close it out there. So thank you, Guadalupe, for joining me this afternoon. I know how busy you are. You're doing so many things at the same time, and I truly appreciate your making the time for all of us. And I also want to thank Rivka and Beth for their assistance with interpretation and captioning, and to Amy for organizing this program. And finally, a big thank you to all of you for tuning in. I hope you will join us in person at the museum on November 21st for an artist talk with Nathaniel Mary Quinn, whose work is on view at the museum in Revolutions, Art from the Hirshhorn Collection, 1860 to 1960. All right, so we'll stop it there. And thank you again, Guadalupe.
Fine. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
for coming.
Thank you.